now we're going on to the pan-seared pickerel and tomatoes with tomatoes. So this you could call a great meatless meal option that is a powerhouse of health protective nutrients. So replacing red meat and processed meat with fish 2 to 3 times per week is one of the strategies you can use to support the cancer prevention guidelines that recommend that we reduce our intake of red meat and reduce our intake of processed meats. The guideline actually says not more than 500 grams of red meat per week. What would that look like? I have a deck of cards. This deck of cards is about the size of the palm of my hand. That is about 100 grams. So we don't want you to have more than 5 of these deck of cards of meat per week. And when it comes to processed meat, we actually prefer that you avoid it completely because the evidence is convincing for processed meats and increased risk, cancer risk. Anyway, enough about that. I see some fish on that plate. Over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Daniela. Okay, so we are making a recipe that is actually from one of the Secran's booklets, and maybe Daniela, I don't know if you have it there.
Oh, yes, I forgot to mention that. It's the My Foods for Life program. So the Secran has this beautiful booklet. It has 2 parts to it. One has recipes for cancer prevention, and that's where this pan-seared pickerel with tomatoes comes from. And then there's a second part that they've included, which I think is awesome, is nutrition tips for when you have cancer and undergoing treatment. So there's sections for diarrhea, constipation, nausea. So it's an excellent book that I think you can download if you want from the Secran website. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me, Jeremy. I forgot about that.
You. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this recipe is from that booklet. They do make it with a different fish, so I think they use halibut in the booklet, but pickerel is in season, and so we're using some great locally sourced pickerel for this recipe. I imagine you could probably use any fish for this recipe. It's really nice and simple, and I think it highlights a lot of what's in season right now, which is fantastic. So, like Daniela mentioned, we're using some pickerel here. So I have our pickerel fillet, skin on. You can have the skin removed if you don't like it with the skin, but it's a really nice, milder fish, which is great if you like something like a trout or salmon. Like I mentioned, you can absolutely use that as well. And to get this ready, just going to add just a little bit of olive oil on both sides. And this will help any seasoning that you add to stick. It also will help prevent it from sticking to the pan that you cook it on. So I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. Both sides. So we're keeping this pretty simple, but obviously, if you like a little bit more flavor, you can change it up. You can add some dried herbs, be nice. All right, and now for our pan, you can do this on the barbecue. You can do this if you have a non-stick pan. If you don't, this is a little trick that I often offer. It makes it really, really easy, especially if you're intimidated to cook fish. Fish, it's not the cheapest protein option, but so you don't want to ruin it. Sometimes I think there's a fear of it sticking to the pan, sort of falling apart. So a little trick, what I like to do is I'll grab a little piece of parchment paper and I'll cut it to the size of my pan. And this is great, especially if you don't have like a nonstick pan or a pan that works really well. There are obviously ways you can do that with other pans, just making sure it's hot enough. But I find that this parchment is just really foolproof. And what I'll do is, medium to medium high heat. And I'm going to start skin side down. And I'm just going to use my fingers just to gently press it to make sure that the contact is there and it doesn't sort of curl up on me. Once I start to hear the searing, so I can hear the searing here, I know that the cooking has begun, which is great. Now I don't need this screaming hot. Again, because of the parchment, it is going to help to do all the work to prevent it from sticking, which is fantastic. And when we're cooking this, we have the skin on. We're going to cook it about 80 to 90% of the way on this side, okay, on the skin side. And then, so we're going to cook on this side for about 5 or so minutes. We'll check it, and then we'll flip it for like the last couple minutes, okay? So while this fish is cooking, we can move on to next ingredients. I guess, Daniela, in regards to the portion.
Yes, I was actually just going to ask you, is that about 100-gram portion? Because that you're cooking there, or?
Yeah, I would say maybe just maybe slightly bigger, maybe like 100,
Yeah.
120 grams.
Okay. And when it comes to fish, we're looking at having it 2 to 3 times per week. Also, what's great about the pickerel, it's a lower fat fish, but it does contain some omega-3 fatty acids, and omega-3 fatty acids are great for heart health, brain health, reducing inflammation. And but the other great thing about this fish is that it not only has we many times focus on fatty fish, omega-3 fatty acids, but fish is a great source of protein. About 100 grams gives you 21 to 28 grams of protein, which is wonderful, what you would want per meal. It also contains several B vitamins and important minerals such as potassium and selenium.
Wonderful. And so you can see I'm just using my spatula, again, just to gently press down so that you get nice even contact on the skin. That'll just give you a nice sort of crispier finish, more even color, because otherwise what it'll do is it'll start to curl up and you'll get the edges nice and brown, but the middle won't be nice and brown. So you can just gently press it as it's cooking there once in a while. And then while that's cooking, the second part of the dish are tomatoes. These lovely tomatoes, again, probably in prime time regarding the seasonality right now. You're seeing the cases in the bushels at your grocery store, which means tomato sauce season is just around the corner. So this is a great time to use tomatoes. And you can use different varieties, any variety for this. I know that in the cookbook, it is choosing an heirloom variety, which is essentially just all your different colors, really nice sort of colorful varieties of tomatoes. But you can use beefsteak tomatoes, you can use cherry tomatoes. They would all be fantastic for this, okay? With the tomatoes, just give them a nice rough dice, super colorful. And then we're going to add a little bit of diced onion to this, or you can use shallots. Basil, fresh basil, and I'm going to just finely chop up the basil. I think the combination of basil and tomato is just a classic, delicious pairing.
It's my absolute favorite combination. While you're doing that amazing chop of basil, I'll just talk a little bit about the tomatoes. So we've heard of lycopene. Lycopene is an infamous antioxidant. It's also a phytochemical, which is a chemical found in plants, and it's abundant in the red colored, the red color of the tomatoes. But the great thing about having a mixture of other colors is we're capitalizing on some of the other phytochemicals, so some that are more prominent in the yellow and the oranges. And they're all carotenoids. They all fit into the carotenoid family. And they also all provide some form of defense for the body against developing cancer cells. It's also great for kind of staying away or steering away from other chronic diseases as well. So antioxidants, phytochemicals, abundant in our tomatoes, and excellent addition to this dish.
Okay, so have our onion, our tomatoes, our beautiful fresh basil in here. We'll add a little salt. The salt is going to start to draw the really tasty and flavorful tomato water out of the tomatoes. And then we'll add some olive oil.
And the neat thing about the olive oil is that lycopene is actually better absorbed in a fat medium. So it is a good idea to have a little bit of fat. And so the olive oil is a great combo there.
And then you can add a little bit of vinegar as well, a little splash of vinegar. You can use balsamic vinegar. I know in the recipe it has white balsamic vinegar. So it has, again, a little bit of sweetness with the acidity, which is really nice. Otherwise, you can use any vinegar you have. You only need a little bit. The tomatoes, as the water starts to draw out, that'll have a little bit of that acidity as well, which is nice. And that's it. We're gonna stir this up. You get a bigger spoon. Here. Pencil. And again, you don't have to do too much. Like the basil and the tomato is going to definitely be a star of this little dressing, this little olive.
While you're stirring, I'll just bring up another term that you come across a lot is non-starchy vegetables. And if you look at some of the World Cancer Research Fund, they'll say increase your intake of non-starchy vegetables. Well, what are those? Basically, the tomatoes used in this recipe, the zucchini used in the first recipe, things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. So they have a lower amount of carbohydrate in it, basically. And they have less calories. So less carbs, less calories. Great if you have diabetes as well. And you go for a lot of color. And then your starchy vegetables, it's not to say they're bad because they have a lot of goodness to them as well. They're more like your sweet potatoes, corn, potatoes. They have a little bit more carbohydrate in it. So you want to eat it in a bit more moderation. They're also a little bit higher in calories, but don't omit them because they also provide you with something called resistant starch, which they're finding has great health benefits for our colon and for helping gut health. And a lot of them also, like our legumes, fall into our starchy vegetable group sometimes, and they're good in protein. So that's the little lesson in non-starchy, starchy vegetables.
See, you're not just going to get some great recipes, some amazing nutrition lesson from Daniela. Look at this. All right, so I gave the fish just a little flip. You can see the other side. So you have some really, really nice. You can hear that crispiness on the skin. Beautiful. And again, because of the parchment, super, super easy to flip, right? No sticking at all, which makes it just incredibly convenient and less messy. I'm going to bring you in a little closer. So I flipped it on the other side just to finish the last couple minutes. And you can tell part really easily. It's done. It's ready to go. So it's on there. And for the last 30 seconds, I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice, not on top of the skin, because I love that crispiness, but just on the side.
Incredible technique, Jeremy. I'm always impressed with all these subtle tricks that you provide that make things just that much better in flavor, in texture.
Well, yeah, I mean, cooking doesn't have to be hard, but there's little things you can do just to make it a little bit better, right? All right, so while that's finishing off and that lemon juice is steaming a little bit, it's getting on the side there, it's gonna make it super flavorful. I'm actually going to start with the tomatoes. I'm gonna plate tomatoes first, right on the bottom of the plate here. Nice serving. Super colorful. I mean, with these heirloom varieties, so colorful. And the fish is done. And again, just to show you how easy it is with the parchments. Out of the pan, minimal mess, no sticking. Get that delicious piece of pickerel right on top. And you have the extra lemon juice. There, and again, that's what it cooked on top of. Like really easy to do. And that is our Pan-Seared pickerel with our heirloom tomato salad inspired by the cookbook. Daniela, remind me of the name again.
My Foods for Life program. Here it is again. Beautiful blue color, lots of color on there. Yeah. Excellent recipe. Oops, there it is. That's a better picture.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. There we go.